This is Derek Father Onwa with the Medicine Shell, and today I'm going to discuss Onwa, the Arushi of the moon in Igbo cosmology. Like all Arushi, she serves as an interface of understanding for self and the universe as a whole. She is Chukwu's eye over the night, and Ala-Nwa, the world of the spirits. She is also a great civilizer, and through her, communities align their actions with universal order. In the beginning, Chukwu's wife Komosu died in a great explosion, and from her body the universe was created. In his grief, Chukwu recluded into a secret chamber known as Obi Chukwu, a four-walled pillared chamber far from creation and existence itself, which was neither in sky nor earth. From the pain of his loss, Chukwu would spend the rest of his existence in this chamber. But Obi Chukwu was a world unto its own, and within this chamber, Chukwu was surrounded by his heavenly creations, the Arushi, and his messengers among many, and together they would take on the task of rebuilding and organizing the universe from the body of his deceased wife. For when Komosu died, she resurrected as Ala, the earth we live on today. But Ala was wrapped in the darkness of Wa, the universe, or the remains of Komosu, also known as Neke, the merciful mother. But despite the darkness, Chukwu's rebuilding of his wife, or in other terms, the rebuilding of the universe, was going along well. Though, in order to finalize his creation, Chukwu hatched a plan. Chukwu looked upon all of his creations, and for the purpose of his next plan, took interest in the Ebenu. The Ebenu was a loving and caring young bird who was nursing her sick mother and sick father back to health. Her efforts ended in failure, and their condition grew worse by the day. Meanwhile, Chukwu continued to watch. And after some time, Chukwu called the Ebenu forward and gave her a mission. Chukwu told the Ebenu that she must go down to Allah and check the progress of his creation. The loyal daughter was honored, and knew the sight would be something great to see. In fact, the Ebenu, as she always did, thought about her parents, and how she could honor them before they passed away by showing them the glory of Chukwu's design. And so, she placed her parents on her back and took off into the virgin universe. But upon arriving, the Ebenu saw nothing. The universe was a realm of cosmic darkness known as the Akwu, without a grain of light to guide her. The earth itself was covered in Oshimiri, or the tears that Chukwu used to bury his wife, and the distance between Obi Chukwu and Ala was so great that the Ebenu worried that her parents would not make it. And so she flied as fast as she could, but then it happened. The first to die was the Ebenu's mother. And without sight of solid ground to bury and honor her mother, the Ebenu opened her own head and buried her mother in there. Next, her father died, and with great sorrow she opened her head again and buried her father within. Despite the pain of her loss, the Ebenu continued her mission. But with new weights and a great distance to travel, she grew tired. It was then that she made out the form of an ube tree, where she finally decided to perch. Now that she was resting, she began to think of her deceased mother and her deceased father, and the pain swole inside her until she could take it no longer. And then she let out a loud, pained cry, Ube. The cry was so loud and came with such force that a giant egg came from her, and the egg she lied fell into the abyss of the new world. And then the Ebenu heard a crack, and then another, and another, until the egg hatched. And what she saw next stunned her from that day till the end of time. Out of the egg came a great ball of fire and a great ball of stone. Both celestial bodies took to the sky, and from there, the sun, Anyanwu, and the moon, Onwa, were born. From the sun and the moon, Ebenu fell to Dioma, the embrace of Chukwu, or love in the form of light, the same feeling she got when she held her parents. In fact, when the Ebenu looked onto Onwa, and looked onto Anyanwu, she felt and saw the spirit of her mother and father, reborn to watch over Chukwu's creation the way she desired them to. The Ebenu was filled with happiness, and from this great deed, as well as her heart as a steadfast and loving daughter, she was crowned the Empress of the Sky, and both her mother and her father became immortals, who would be honored by their daughter and by Chukwu through the act of overseeing creation for the rest of time. In this video, I will explain who Onwa is, the role Onwa plays as a civilizer for both the visible and invisible world, as well as the relationship our ancestors had with the moon, including details on nightlife in the ancestral eras. And finally, an interesting revelation about the story of the Ebenu and how she brought Anyanwu, the sun, and Onwa, the moon, in an act of resurrection. Onwa and Anyanwu are the twin Ndoji or messengers that Chukwu brought to the world in an act of resurrection for the purpose of guiding, watching over, and relaying messages back to Obi Chukwu about his creation, and both play a foundational role in Igbo spirituality, thought, culture, and universal outlook. In their twin dynamic, Anyanwu watches over and guides the living, visible world, while Onwa watches over the invisible spiritual world. And therefore, Onwa is the enlightener of Ala-Nwa, the land of spirits, as well as the individual Mmuo. While often translated as spirits, Mmuo takes a unique dynamic in Igbo cosmology. Mmuo is the part of the individual that grows with them and shadows their identity and will, preserving it forever once the individual passes. At the same time, all Mmuo is divine and can be found in elements of nature, animals, the Arushi, as well as people. Like Onwa, an individual's Mmuo is a reflexive light. And while the chi is closer to the ideal self, Mmuo is a reflection or a capsule of one's reality in character, actions, and personal will. Hence the saying, Ichor ajo Mmuo, igafo ajo mmadụ. Ichor ajo mmadụ, igafo ajo Mmuo. And when one passes, this externalized version of self is what lives forever. And it's the choice of the descendants of the individual to decide whether the Mmuo you brought to the world is worthy of veneration. For when you venerate a spirit, you give it a home. Onwa takes particular interest in children, as they are seen as more spirit than person until taking certain rites and ceremonies, typically done before the first year of a child's birth. For this reason, many of the gifts that Onwa brings to the world pertain to children. For example, it was Onwa who taught humanity the practice of Ala-Nwa, or the burying of the umbilical cord. When a baby is born, the umbilical cord is severed, wrapped around a seed, and planted in the child's ancestral community. This seed then absorbs their mineral essence, and the tree that comes from the seed becomes the tree of life of the child. The tree grows as the child grows, and throughout the individual's life, it serves many purposes. The tree of life acts to root a child in the community they are from, as many revisit their tree into old age. For boys, its branches can be used to craft their ofo or ikenga when they become men. And for girls becoming women, their tree of life is often the Omu, or palm tree, which is a symbol of Onwa and Anyanwu. When a woman marries into a new community, she brings a branch from her tree into her husband's home and community, and uses it in her personal altar to represent her heritage and self. It is important to note that any tree or any seed can be used in the forming of the tree of life, as it is completely up to the parents as to how they want to represent their child. Onwa is central in ancestral civilization because it is from her that we understand the seasons and time itself. Through observing the moon, Igbo culture devised a calendar for the regulation of personal and community events. In a tradition known as Igbo Igbo is based on a 4-day week known as Izu. The 4 days in order are Eke, Orie, Afo, and Nkwo. 7 cycles of the 4-day Izu make a 28-day Onwa or moon in the Igbo calendar. Many Onwa are dedicated to specific community actions, spiritual observances, orientations, and ceremonies such as masquerades that begin at the appearance of the new moon and subside at the end of the 28 days. Finally, the entire Afo or year is complete after 13 lunar cycles of 28 days. Some Onwa are dedicated to harvesting and planting, while others are dedicated to a particular Arushi. In the cases where an Onwa is dedicated to an Arushi, that 28-day period of the year will reflect elements of the Arushi's nature. And for the communities that observe it, the priesthood of that Arushi will govern the society until the end of the 28-day period. These particular moons feature the public display of masquerades belonging to the spiritual society in control for the 28-day period. These societies are organizations of initiated men, inducted often by merit and trained in the ability to perform certain rites, as well as being afforded certain privileges for their elite status. During the Onwa that a certain masquerade society is in control, they will present a masquerade to the public that represents their craft and organization, as well as the spiritual themes, prowess, and history of a community in the form of dance and display. In this way, masquerades serve as calendar keepers, often appearing at the beginning of a moon and disappearing at its end. That being said, the following Igbo Afo comes from the Anedo Umweri region and goes as follows. The first moon is Onwa, which ranges from February to March. Then comes Onwa Abuo, which ranges from March to April, followed by Onwa Ifeke in April and May. This moon is dedicated to the Ikenga, the acceptance and triumph over hardship and struggle. Under this moon, some communities observe fasting, and some have prohibitions against music, celebration, and dance during this time. This is also the season of the warrior, as wrestling competitions take place at the end of this moon. Onwa Ifeke is dedicated to triumph, struggle, and the building of personal and community discipline and strength. It should also be noted that in most communities, this is the furthest moon from harvest. And in most of the world's lunar calendars, this moon is met by a period of fasting or a focus on warrior ethics, as Ramadan, Passover, and the Aries constellation all fall within this time period. Next is Onwa Ano, which falls between May and June, and in some communities is the furthest from harvest, followed by Onwa Agun, the fifth moon. Onwa Agun is dedicated to celebrating Agun, the universal mind and Arushi of wisdom. This moon is dedicated to the dibias of a community, as Agun is their patron spirit. And throughout Igbo land, this is a time of heavy masquerade activity, though the masquerade society that dominates this moon differs by community. Many communities set curfews at this time, as anyone who is not a titled man, a dibia, or most importantly a member of the masquerade society, is not to be out past a certain time. At night, masquerades will visit the homes of initiated members to honor them. If a community adheres to a curfew this season, those who violate are chased or flogged by the masquerade or members of the masquerade society, or made to pay a heavy fine the following morning, when the masquerade and its representatives make a punitive visit. Onwa Agun is also an important moon for driving away the spirits attached to failure, sloth, disaster, theft, and poor yields from a community and an individual's life. And often to do this, the spirit of Ekwensu is summoned to wipe the slate clean of malignant spirits. During ceremonies connected to Ekwensu, individuals profess their sins and the causes of their failure the previous year. And then they make an oath to themselves and their families to not repeat the behavior, habit, or approach that caused failure the previous year if they witnessed failure. From this, individuals are absolved from shame and assure themselves the focus of spirit to succeed in the coming year. This is the moon of cleansing, atonement, appeasement, and connection with the ancestors, as well as completing the spiritual rites necessary for a successful harvest in the moon to come. The sixth moon is Onwa Ifenjoku. Onwa Ifenjoku is the most common planting moon. This Onwa is dedicated to Njokuji, the Arushi of the yam harvest in agriculture. Most of what takes place in communities in the preceding Onwa is spiritual preparation for the physical work that will be done during this moon. The yams planted this moon will be used to celebrate Irinji, the New Yam Festival, sometime in the next 2 to 3 moons depending on the community. Onwa Ifenjoku takes place between July and August. Onwa 7 is Onwa Alumchi between August and early September. This is the Onwa dedicated to women, specifically mothers, both living and deceased. During this moon, ceremonies are performed to the chi altar of the mother of the family, and she is offered gifts by friends and family alike. During this moon, women are encouraged to build a dialogue with the spirits of their matron ancestors, as well as their unborn children. After Onwa Alumchi is Onwa Mmuo, from the end of August to the middle of September, and then Onwa Ana from mid-September to mid-October, followed by Onwa Okike from mid-October to mid-November. Then the 11th moon, Onwa Ajana, from mid-November to early December, and then Onwa Ede Ajala from early December to early January. And finally, Onwa Uzo Arushi from early January to mid-February. If you're interested in learning the details of the moons, I'll make a video specifically dedicated to a more in-depth assessment of the Igbo calendar and understanding of time. So let me know if you're interested in the comments. And for those who are interested in knowing what to do with or how to relate with the Arushi, or what role they play in our lives, Onwa provides a perfect example. The Arushi are the spiritual forces that make up the whole of our existence. And therefore, when one seeks to find balance with self and the universe, they must align their actions, character, and understanding with the universe through the Arushi, who serve as role models for universal alignment. The Arushi are the beat, and your actions are the dance. Communities align their actions with Onwa in order to maintain harmony with the order of the universe. In doing so, they know when to plant, when to fast, when to celebrate, when to perform certain rituals for full effect, and when to start it all over again. Alignment with Onwa teaches us about Mmuo, the part of us that is connected to her, our spiritual shadow, and the night to our Chi's day, which houses the supernatural properties of every person, place, and thing. For our ancestors, and many of us today, the appearance of Onwa was cause for relaxation and celebration. In the ancestral era, nightlife witnessed a host of cultural and recreational activities, often reaching peak activity during the full moon. For example, traveling storytellers and comedians made careers going from host home to host home, community to community, or performing within their own kindred through the art of sorumchia. Sorumchia was a form of performative comedy enjoyed by our ancestors, often featuring skits, mocking masquerades, funny stories, and jokes that could be easily identified as stand-up today. I'm not going to deliver this one right, so ndichem biko meremebe. But I had the privilege of getting a hold of a joke told by an entertainer in the ancestral era. The joke went as follows. A father spent his every waking day teaching his children the difference between right and wrong, helping them build their character and learn the value of honesty. decency. So when the children saw the village people gather to beat their father, they were surprised. Once the children ran up to the crowd, they realized their father was accused of stealing another man's yam. Confused, one of the children asked, "Father, but you taught us never to steal. What happened?" And the father responded, "All the time I spent teaching you not to steal. Did you bother teaching me?" The full moon was also a time of play and celebration for children. Getting a chance to play during the full moon was seen as a privilege earned by good behavior and the completion of chores. Once outside, with all the other children in the community, children engaged in a range of games, including the singing of Egwu, playful songs made up by children that were more often than not nonsensical, or comprising of funny lyrics. Children also engaged in competitions, and at times sung in a competitive call and response manner. Children also engaged in competition facilitated by adults that tested their wits and abilities. Deciphering proverbs and tongue twister competitions as well as trivia were common under the chaos of the full moon. Most importantly, nighttime was a time for storytelling. Stories of this era passed down to children traditionally were attached to moral lessons. When not teaching history, these stories taught honesty, humility, diligence, bravery, and the eventual correcting nature of the universe when a person does wrong against another. These were known as tales by moonlight, and often featured characters of questionable judgment and character, as well as talking animals such as the famous Mmuo the tortoise, a stand-in for wisdom used right or wrong. I personally found it interesting that the tortoise is also connected to Akwu, the Arushi of wisdom. And so, before I finish this video, I would like to share a tale by Moonlight about the girl who married the skull. There was a daughter in a faraway land who everyone knew for two things: her great beauty and her great pride. She was so beautiful that any man who passed her came to her home the next morning pleading for marriage, but so proud that she always found one thing or another that wasn't good enough for her. A man with the most handsome eyes would approach, but his teeth would fail the test. A man with the finest teeth would approach, but his hair would fail the test. A man with the most handsome hair would approach, and his skin, his arms, his legs, no matter what, the girl would always find something until she found herself alone in her father's house. But one day, upon hearing about her beauty, a skull emerged from its grave and began heading to her home. The next morning, the girl woke up to find the most handsome man she had ever seen on her doorsteps. He had the finest teeth, the finest eyes, and the finest hair, and without hesitation, the girl was swept away by this mysterious man. They rushed to her father to pay her dowry, and when everything was complete, she followed her husband to their new home. But on the way there, they passed a former suitor, who for some reason had no eyes. Quickly, her husband pulled his own eyes out of the sockets and gave it back to the man on the road. And then they passed another suitor, but for some reason he had no teeth. Quickly, the husband pulled the teeth from his mouth and gave it back to the man on the road. And then another suitor passed, but for some reason he had no hair. And quickly, the husband pulled the hair from his scalp and gave it back to the man. And this continued over and over as the husband gave his arms, his stomach, his legs, his skin, and everything he borrowed back to their owners. When the daughter realized that this was no man at all, but instead a floating skull, she was already standing on top the grave he came from. And quickly the sand swallowed her and took her into the world below. And that's it. This is Derek Onwa with the Medicine Shell. I want to thank you for watching. Hit subscribe if you are interested in Igbo spirituality, cosmology, culture, and everything I cover on this channel. I'm interested in making these videos full time, and becoming a patron on Patreon will go a long way in helping me make this happen. I want to thank all my current patrons for your contribution. It means a lot to me and everyone learning from this channel. And if you're interested in donating, there's a link below, or you can go to www.patreon.com/medicineshell. Otherwise, let me know what topics you're interested in seeing me cover, and if you can't donate, sharing this or making somebody else aware of these videos goes a long way in helping as well. Also, I mentioned there was a revelation that I had made when learning about Onwa and Anyanwu, and it was through the story of the Ebenu. Now, before I say this, I want to make sure that nobody takes this comparison too far left into a place that can't be at least verified with evidence, because our culture suffers a lot from pseudo-history and attempts to link us with people that we have nothing to do with. But I do find this particular story interesting because it's very similar to a story and matches all of the same beats as the Egyptian story of the Bennu. The parallels are really fascinating in my opinion. Both of them fly over the primordial waters on a mission to check on the progress of the world. They both perch Our bird perches on an ube, the Bennu perches on a stone, and they both give rise to the sun thereafter, or the concept of resurrection. In the Kemetic language, I'm told that the name of the Bennu alludes to rising in brilliance or to shine. What's also interesting is they're both herons, though in the Igbo version of the story, it's often told as a hornbill. The Greek sage Herodotus made it clear that the Greek phoenix is based on the story of the Bennu, and in all three cultures, the bird represents resurrection, though in the Greek bird, the phoenix dies and resurrects itself, but also maintains its same symbolic relationship with the sun, and even the palm tree, which is a symbol for Anyanwu and Onwa. I usually hesitate to bring up other cultures in these videos because too little is known about Igbo history by the average Igbo person, and sometimes people try to substitute that by making connections to other histories or even fables that we're better versed in, like the Bible. So I don't want to contribute to that trend. But again, the parallels are there and they are very interesting. Let me know what you want to cover next and stay tuned.